Hi, and welcome to the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. This is a podcast for teachers, by teachers, and I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross. I'm so excited, new teachers, that you joined us today because you are in for a treat. You are in for a treat today. Today, we're going to talk about literacy strategies for every classroom to help struggling readers. And I'm excited that we have an award-winning, internationally known, renowned author with us today, Dr. Gwen Lavert. She's president, CEO, and founder of Lavert Literacy, LLC. She's an award-winning administrator, teacher, and author, focusing on closing the literacy gap for all children that's struggling with reading as a practitioner, a professor, a speaker, coach, trainer, and consultant. Dr. Lavert has helped people all over the world with struggling schools, moving children out of the bottom 25%, moving them to the top, moving schools from D's and F to A's and B's. So we're so excited to have Dr. Lavert with us today, guys. We are in for a huge treat. Dr. Lavert, at this time, could you introduce yourself to my audience and the new teachers? Tell us who you are and how you got to this point. And I know that well is deep because I can just tell from the introduction that you have a lot. So just tell us who you are and where did you find your love for literacy and wanting to help children read?
Hi, Terry. It is so great to be here with you today. Reading comes from the heart. You've
Yes.
got to feel it and spread it all over the world. When I was a little girl growing up in Paris, Texas, that's outside of Dallas, my mother was so excited because my mother's family were sharecroppers. So my mother never really got to go to school. The days that kids were in school, my mother was out in the fields doing all kinds of things because they were country people.
Yes.
But she married my father, who was a city boy. And so he was a professional baseball player. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs. And
Yes.
he was a basketball player. He did all those things, but he was also an advocate. And he was the 21st century, one of the 21st century leaders for our small town. Well, to tell you all of that, I grew up, even though my mother did not have the opportunity to go to school. You know, there's something inside of us that shows our excellence if it's presented at the right time. So in church, it was the time for her to read poetry, for her to write. She journal wrote all the time. She was a singer. She was all those things. And so when I went to first grade, it wasn't the time where they were calling parents in, telling them to come and have meetings about their children. When we knew anything, I had not passed first grade. My mother was shocked. And of course, she went right away to talk with the teacher. She said, and you know what she said to me? We're not worrying about this because this is not a representative of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got home, I realized then that my schooling did not take place in those classrooms. It took place with my mother and my father. And my mother taught me how to read, how to write. Whenever we had a program at church, I was standing up reading poetry, Langston Hughes and all those people, and knew all the songs. We didn't have picture books at that time in our home, but she bought all the encyclopedias. She had all kinds of poems, and the poems were from songs. Nobody knows the trouble I see. So she would sing and then she would show us the words to those. So
Wow.
I was reading in no time. And so I made a commitment that I was going to become a teacher and all of my children would be able to read. Now tell me if I'm going too long, but
No, that's
I just,
awesome.
I just know that when I graduated from Texas A&M and I had some amazing professors but none that looked like me. So in my teaching, I was using what my mother taught, but also using the pedagogy and methodology of what I'd learned in that school. So we weren't talking about culturally responsive teaching, but I knew what I was learning at home was different from what I was learning at school. And what I was learning at home just set my soul on fire for learning. But something happened to me that in that first grade classroom, my first year, that what I was learning at the university was overriding what I was learning at home. And so by December over 3/4 of my kids were not reading. So I got on my knees and I asked God to forgive me because I knew what had happened to me. The school was surrounded by 4 housing projects.
Yes.
And my mother, who was not learned, but she knew so much. And so she came to visit me, and I was crying the entire weekend because I was thinking my kids cannot read and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. So I realized, she said, well, how did you learn to read? And what did we do to help you learn how to read? So I was able to, that summer, that Christmas break, I was able to infuse the pedagogy and methodology into what she taught me. And I came back to that school on fire after Christmas. I was using differentiated instruction before they even talked about differentiated instruction. I had my college table where kids were rotating to me. And I was using strategies not only that I learned through the university, but those strategies that my mother had taught me in order to be like the sound. We know that the stage of reading is something that doesn't come naturally. We have to rewire the brain.
Yes.
And so my mother rewired my brain, so I had to rewire the brains of my kids. And I started writing stories. And the kids loved it. And in small groups, I taught them how to hear the sounds of language. So that just penetrated through me through all until I got my master's degree in reading. And that even moved me even to a higher degree. And I joined the International Literacy Association, which was the International Reading at the time.
Yes.
Now it's International Literacy.
Yes.
I joined that and I met all the researchers. And I just continued on from a teacher to a district coach to assistant principal. In the mix of that, I worked for publishing companies. I worked for Pearson. I worked for, it was Harcourt at the time, going all over. I met people like Asa Hilliard, who really pushed that into me about, I mean, as a matter of fact, I took him to a meeting one day and we presented together. And so that part of cultural responsive teaching I knew was grounded. And then I had a very horrible experience in an elementary school where I was the only Black principal in the whole district. And so I learned how to work with teachers from different cultures and what made that important. And then from there, I got my PhD. I worked with Dr. Ruben Feuerstein, who believed that the brain could be trained. And so I went to Israel, Amsterdam, and I spent up until 2007 in Paris, France, working with him on how to identify those cognitive functions that have not been developed in helping kids to learn phonological awareness, to learn phonics, to learn fluency from an automatic perspective, and also from that move into comprehension. So Feuerstein did that. And so here I am today. I've worked in schools and low performing. And as you said, I've moved those schools. But the most important thing is the love of literacy, the love of reading stories to children, to set the children on fire. And I guess the biggest compliment was my grandson when I moved into his brain to help him move beyond rote and recall. He said to me, "Gigi, you are a great woman." So that's my story.
That is an awesome story, and it's amazing how our paths have crossed so many times. Dr. Asa Hilliard, I met him at Harvard back in the summer of 97. I went to an institute there for special education called Race, Class, Language, and Culture, and I met him there, and he instantly became a mentor of mine, and I joined ASCAC, the Association for Classical African Civilizations, that he was a big part of. And I think our paths may have crossed again because you're from the Dallas area. Are you familiar with Dr. J. Helen Perkins and Dr. Bob Cooter?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Dr. Cooter read one of my books. I think it was The Barber's Cutting Edge. And we've connected. We're supposed to be having lunch at some point in time, but we have not. I know him and he's used some of my work. Yes.
Yes, they created here in Memphis. They moved from Dallas. I think they were at SMU. And they came to the University of Memphis, and I was in the inaugural class of the literacy fellows that they created. And they created a leadership rank because they didn't want the teachers to get the work and the principals not get it. And my story is very similar to yours. Growing up in a large family in a rural town, the common denominator is a mother who ensured that dad supported her in putting encyclopedias in the home.
Yeah,
It's a game changer.
it
Having
is.
a bookshelf in the home with books on it that children must use is a game changer in families. And we were the family in the community that had the encyclopedias that other students came to borrow and look at them and check out and things like that. But we also had the childcraft books
Yeah,
that went with the World Book encyclopedias. And then
yes.
we had the famous Black Americans book that were brown and had the little gold writing on them. So as a child, I had to read 30 minutes after school every day. And in the childcraft books, there were projects and things that you can do. So it kind of helped with both sides of my brain. I did the reading, but I also did a lot of projects that weren't school projects. And my parents really supported that. And I'm the youngest of 9, so I'm from a large family as well. I don't know whether you're from
Oh,
a large family, but I'm from a
I'm not.
large
I
family.
have 2 sisters and I have
Okay.
a brother. My brother has since passed away. But another person that has been influential in my work in early literacy has been Marilyn Adams. And Marilyn Adams was a former president of the International Literacy Association. She's written books on phonics and phonemic awareness. As a matter of fact, I wrote 5 books when the National Reading Panel came out with those 5 things, that the big 5 that every
Yes.
reading continuum must have. Then I wrote them with my my partner. I call him my partner, but Jim Belanca was the CEO and founder of Skylight Publishing House. And so he edited these books, but Marilyn Adams wrote, I have to tell you this real fast, but Marilyn Adams wrote, she says, here is a book by someone who so clearly loves children, loves teachers, and loves teaching. I love reading everything that Gwen Lavert writes. Marilyn Jagger Adams, author, beginning to read, thinking and learning about print, visiting professor at Brown University.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So let's get into it. Teachers, you are in for a treat today, as I said. And today we're going to talk about 3 powerful strategies that you can use to move your students in reading. These strategies can support any struggling reader from preschool through 12th grade. Even if you have early adults or young adults in college, these strategies can help them, because the thing about literacy is we never stop developing. We never stop growing. We never stop learning. And for anyone, like I tell students all the time, if you want to get better at reading, you're going to have to do it just like you do basketball, football, or a new dance that you're learning. You're going to have to practice it, practice it, practice it. But as teachers, there are scientifically research-based strategies that we can use to support our students. And that's what Dr. Lavert is going to share with us today. So Dr. Lavert, what is the first strategy that you would like to share with new teachers that can help them close that literacy gap with their students?
Okay. Well, the first one, which has been very successful for me, is reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is a comprehension strategy that goes really well. We start off with the teacher reading aloud each day. And I have to tell you a little bit of background. So, as a founder of a charter school that was a top performing charter for Ball State University, every year, all of our 3rd graders made 100% on the state Indiana State test, iReady test. And so you start off with, it's a read aloud. And the teacher starts off reading. I started like 10 minutes each day. And I had 3/4 of my 3rd graders who were not reading at grade level when I took this group. I was a curriculum director, and I told the principal, we don't have time to hire a new teacher. I need to step in. And so I looked for a book. It's called, I can't think of the title of the book right now. But anyway, I found this book and I've started reading 10 minutes every single day, because they needed to hear my voice. They needed to understand how to ask themselves questions. So it was a matter of rewiring their brain, because reading by itself is not natural. Talking is, but reading is not. So I knew I had to rewire their brains. So I read, and then I would stop at a pivotal point in the story, and I would ask, first, predict. What do you think this story is going to be about? And then as I was reading at a pivotal, now you have to read the book before you you start this strategy, teachers, to remember where those pivotal points are that you need to stop and have kids to discuss. Okay, so I'll stop and what do you think is going to happen next in this story? So you're going to predict what do you think is going to happen next. Then you're going to clarify. So anything that could be going on in the story that you needed to clarify, because when I'm reading alone, I've got to start clarifying some things. I don't know anything about this. I'm a Southern girl. This story took place in New York City. Or it took place in Kentucky. I have no idea what they're talking about. So I need some clarity. And then I'll get to a certain point where we have to stop and talk about the main idea. What is the main point that the author is trying to make? So we're moving them from just decoding to actually moving themselves into the story and really getting involved or having a relationship with the author. And that's the part that keeps kids from going into proficiency, because they get confused when they're trying to figure out words and lose sight of the meaning. But this keeps them on task. So then after they clarify, they do the main idea, and then we come to a part where they have to summarize. What is this story all about? What is it all about? And so we do that every single day. And I'll say, it says about in 90 days, I think it's maybe less than 90 days. So I put a big calendar up and I mark the days. And sometimes the kids would say, Dr. Lavert, you didn't do the read aloud. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I got so involved in this. Let me get with it. And so then I would say, okay, now what do we do first? We do the reciprocal teaching. And I call it by its name. That's another thing too. When we're talking with kids about strategies, we don't call names. This is reciprocal teaching. And I'll say this even to third graders. The research says this will help you. You have to tell them why. This will help you when you're trying to understand what the author is trying to tell you. Because there's not a writer that writes without a purpose. They have a purpose, and they're so excited about their purpose that they want you to know about. And so by that time, you can see kids talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. Just Juice is the story. So teachers, get Just Juice, because this is a little third grader who was retained in third grade. And she was retained, and they were up in the hills of Kentucky. And she found out that her father could not read. He could not keep a job. And so one time she said, her father said, sometimes I feel like a chained dog. What does that mean to you? Because I can't decode the words fast enough. And I want to do them fast enough so I can get the meaning. I have this relationship with this author and I can move forward. So we continue. Let's say you started off in September, August, and you do reciprocal teaching with them. You're the person until December. And then December, you come to your mid-assessment. If you're doing NWEA, or if the MAP test, or if you're doing iReady, so you have a beginning task, one in the middle and one in the end. So the middle one falls in about December. Then you should be finished reading aloud to them, even though you're still going to read some things. But now it's time for you to move those literacy clubs. So that's another strategy. The literacy clubs is when you put kids into groups. And you give them, look that up, and you'll be able to give them all, instead of you putting all the questions up there, you give them all, what do you predict? What do you need to clarify in this chapter? What are some other questions that you want to ask? What is the main idea? And then how do we summarize? So you have about 5 kids. So you have all these little groups in your classroom, and you have one person who's going to help move it around, but everybody has a part. By the end of the year, when we had 3/4 of our kids who were not reading at grade level in that third grade class, all of them were reading at grade level proficiency, even those kids who were in special ed that had an IEP, but the IEP was really because of their behavior.
Yes.
I
Yes.
turned them on.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
turned them on.
You
So
activated them.
I had activated them. Fire was running all over our place. And every time we would have a major part, see, the teacher again has to read the novel. Because if they're like third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and on up, you're reading a novel. If they're little ones, then you're reading picture books. And then
Yes.
gradually, I have moved into novels with them. So this is a powerful strategy that can be used all year long. But you're moving, like I said, from the teacher reading and questioning them and giving them the questions to the students moving into literacy groups, literacy circles. That's what the research says.
Yes.
I call it literacy groups, literacy powerhouse. I use anything that's going to move them to higher order. So those two. Now, once they finish, this is all moving in their brains, rewiring the brain. So most teachers spend most of the year practicing these passages and asking them questions, bottom line. But you need to stay in their heads. So this is the QAR, question, answer, response, or relationship.
Stop for a second. Let's unpack. Let's unpack reciprocal teaching first.
Okay.
Because I love the fact you did some things that I practice as a principal, and it moved our school. One of the things that I would ask the teachers to do, and they did it, is use teacher language with the students. If the students did not know the scientific language to that strategy, then they weren't learning that strategy. They needed to know that they were learning inferences.
Yes.
They needed to know that they were learning author's purpose. So when I walked in second grade classrooms, third grade classrooms, when I asked the students what were they learning, they had to tell me the objective on the board, what they were learning. And it made all of the difference, because so often we don't use academic language with our children.
That's so true.
Because we don't use that academic language, they don't know what they're learning. And if they don't know what they are learning, how can they apply it to a situation?
They cannot.
And I also love the fact that you said you called your groups literacy clubs. That is such an elevation from the slow group, the middle group, and the fast group. We call them clubs. That is so awesome. And that reading to them every day, you're modeling literacy.
Yes.
And it sounds as if you were doing some think alouds within that, because you said you were teaching them how to think about what they were reading. So did you stop and ask yourself questions along the way?
Almost definitely, because that's what reciprocal teaching. Let me tell you this, there is a solid research base for reciprocal teaching. So it goes right along with the science of reading. So if I'm asking them to predict, I'm asking them, did you write those 4 things down?
Yes, predict, clarify, main idea, and summarize.
That's it.
Yes. Yes, I did.
As I go through each one, I'm talking with them about it, explaining it to them. And then I'll say, well, what do you think? The prediction, how would you predict? What do you predict is going to happen? So I use those words. So if they're predicting, many times they're using their background knowledge in order to figure it out. Is that the question that you asked me?
Yes. It was just unpacking it. So, and I love this, because when I was at the elementary level as a principal, I did some research around, because I kept thinking comprehension was this strategy, because I came from high school. So I kept thinking that comprehension was this strategy. So I started to do some research, and you let me know how close I am. To teach comprehension, there are about 58 different strategies that I found within that. Are there more?
Oh, probably about that and more. You know who can give, and I won't go and pull up, my room is full of books, but John Hattie's book on literacy, and he does data analysis for all those strategies that can happen. Use that as a resource, and I can't pull it up right now because I have to get up and start on another topic.
Yes.
But yes, they're probably more than that.
Yeah.
He tells you once, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, this was back in 2003, because we had just gotten a Scott Forsman reading adoption, and my teachers kept telling me there's a hole in the phonics area, that there's not much phonics in this adoption right now. So we purchased another supplement to consumable to build the students in phonics, and it worked. And one of the things that I found out during that time is that you better listen to your teachers.
Oh, most definitely.
Listen to your teachers, because the boots on the ground, they're the ones, they know what's happening. When you get a new adoption in, they can tell you what's working, what's not working, where you need to supplement, where you need to subtract, and all of those things. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we were going right into the second strategy, which is QAR. Tell us what QAR is and how our new teachers can implement that in their
Question,
classroom.
answer, and relationship. So questions,
Okay.
what are the questions that you could ask yourself as you are reading? Is the answer right there? Do I have to think and search, or do I have to find it on my own? So those are the answers. And then what is the relationship between all of that, the questions and the answer? What's the relationship between the two? So from that point on, and I said, so like right there is right there on the page. It's right there in the page. You don't have to worry about it. It's right there. So then we do one. It was says, what was the name of the dog in our story? Do you think you have to think and search for that? Do you think it's going to be right there? And where could it be right there? Could it be in the title? Or is it in the first paragraph? The first sentence of it? Johnny wanted to go to. Who are we talking about? Johnny. Is Johnny's name in the title? Yes, it is. Let's look through here, look through this first page and see how many times we see the main character's name in the passage. And we take time because we're doing analyzing the text. And so from there, we go into the things that are not in the text. It's in your head. You've got to think and search. So let me give you an example of one. And then I would give them an example. So I'll give them a passage with one or two or three or four kinds of answers. And most, I believe, and I'm not sure about that, so don't quote me, but a high percentage of the questions that the test makers use, they use this QAR strategy. So if the teacher is using reciprocal teaching along with the QAR, that's going to make your scores just go up, and kids will start thinking about it. I'm sorry.
You said they have right there.
Right there. So it's right there, think and search, and on my own.
Think and search, okay.
Now that on my own is think and search means that you have to use inferencing. Sometimes it's cause and effect. So that's another one that can have different kinds. So this is a great professional development tool to have teachers give them a passage and give them two or three or four possible questions and have them to analyze. Where are your right there questions? Where are your think and search questions? And where is your on your own? That means it's not in the passage at all. You've got to find it on your own. So that means you've got to use cause and effect, inferencing, all those higher order thinking strategies to figure it out on your own.
What type of question would be an on your own question?
Oh my gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that. If Johnny had not gone home, what do you think would have happened? So something happened in the story that if he had not, Johnny forgot and left the oatmeal pot on cooking. Johnny forgot to turn the flame off for the oatmeal he was cooking. And he had walked to the bus stop. Once he got to the bus stop, he remembered that it was still cooking. So he asked the bus driver, please wait. I forgot to turn the pot off in the kitchen. So the question would be, what would have happened if Johnny had not remembered the oatmeal cooking in the pot? What would have happened? The writer didn't say, But from his, and so you'll have some possible responses for that. So they have to figure it out on their own. What would have happened? What would have happened if he did not remember?
Yes.
Johnny did not remember to turn the pot off in the kitchen. What do you think happened?
Yes.
The writer did not say anything about it. The author did not say anything. But what do you think? My grandson has this thing of saying, Gigi, I do not know. I do not know.
They didn't give me enough information.
They didn't give me enough information. So I have my students say, well, the author did not, what do you think would happen? So I would take time. So teachers need to understand, schools that I've turned around, I had to tell teachers, don't be afraid to go over in your reading time, because you're going to use these strategies not only in reading, you're going to use it in science, you're going to use math, you're going to use it in all areas.
Studies. Yes.
Social studies, all of those. So don't be afraid to go, because in the Middle East, I had teachers who said, one teacher said 3/4 of my kids are not reading. And she said, I feel so bad because I can't go back. So these teachers are coming from all over the world. I don't have time because if my supervisor comes in and I'm not where I should be in my lesson plans, then I am dinged for that. And so I have to go on. So that means 3/4 of her kids are still not getting what they need. So when I was working in my last school as a principal, they said, well, we don't have time. I said, who said you don't have time?
Absolutely.
Who said you don't have time? Well, I thought we didn't have time. We need to rush through. But who said that? I didn't. I'm the principal. I'm your instructional leader. And I'm not saying that. Absolutely. If you still need kids, because we're talking about targeted intervention, intense targeted intervention. That's what we're talking about. And so therefore, you need to stop or have that's why if you have personal portfolios for all of your kids, then you're going to have differentiation going on at all times. So they're going to have thematic units that they're working on, and they have this whole list, like the backward design. They're going to have all these different things. They'll have a little sheet of all the things that they need to work on. And so while you're working with them, you're pulling them back and forth, and they're working on something that they love. Who cares about that other?
Absolutely. And I love that you said that. Well, you didn't say it, but this is what you said. You didn't worry about the pacing guide.
That's it.
Because see, you're keeping up with the pacing guide, but you're leaving the children behind.
That's exactly.
And so as a leader, I did the same thing. I would tell my teachers, well, when central office come and do their, or district office, whatever you call it, come and do their walkthrough, if you're not on pace, I'll take that hit.
Yeah.
They're going to give me the report. And I would always sit there and say, oh my, they're not on pace, but we're going to have to get on that. Thank you very much, and usher them right on out the door so we could get back to teaching children. Because what we had done was we were in my elementary school. It was 97% Title I, but 95%, 96% of my students were proficient and advanced in reading, 95 were proficient and advanced in writing, and 94 were proficient and advanced in math. And it's because those informational text strategies that's in reading. So when reading needs to carry over, we literally lift those strategies from the reading area and inserted them into our social studies time, into our science time. Because I knew that those literary strategies, they really couldn't implement those in social studies and science. Some areas they could if there were some stories down there, but if they were reading like informational text, we could easily take those strategies from reading and implement them in social studies and science and in math. Because one of the reasons our students are not doing well in math is because math is a second language.
It is.
All to itself.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the main thing too, my teachers in my last school, as I said, during the pandemic, they knew I was on the team to develop those pacing guides. And so they knew, and they were using my work and put that into the pacing guide. So not only did they have those guides, but they also we used the map test. And so they had the continuum.
Yes.
And they had the personal portfolio of each of their kids where all of that was embedded. And so the MAP test was aligned to the state standards.
Yes.
So they were still covering. So I never had to mention pace and guide to them because they knew up front that all of that was embedded in what we were doing.
Yes. That's awesome. That's awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we've covered reciprocal teaching. We've covered QAR, question answer relationship. And our last strategy is what?
So my last one is early literacy. I wanted to talk a little bit about phonological awareness.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's the backbone.
It's the backbone. Marilyn Adams said that phonological awareness was the awareness of phonemes, although the most closely tied to decoding skills, seems to come only after a child is aware of larger units.
After they are aware of larger units.
Of larger units. She says phonological awareness can be compared to like the funnel. You know what a funnel is, and you're putting things in there, and you start off with the whole word. And so you put like cat, and you put cat in there, and it flows all the way down. And when it comes out, it's going to be cat. But you start off with the whole word. She says that it includes all the sounds of language that we hear. It starts with the larger chunks, words within sentences, and then moves to rhyming parts within words, compound words, syllables, beginning sounds, onset and rhyme, and then individual phoneme. And she said when we reach the bottom of the funnel, we're talking about the tiny units of speech that we call phonemes. The segmentation, the blending, and the manipulation of phonemes is what is known as phonemic awareness. Yes. And and what really confuses our children is that I shouldn't say most, allegedly, there are teachers who start off with phonemic awareness, and they're assuming that kids will get the other part at home. But that's not happening because parents are not aware of it. They are not aware of it. So they're not doing anything. So then you have a child in your classroom and said, okay, I'm going to give you the word mat. Mat. I want you to take away the and add, what's the new word? Hat. Yes. All right. So now you have hat. I want you to take away the a in hat and add the I. What's the new word? Hit. That is the phonemic awareness is the most complex process in phonological awareness.
Now that strategy you just used, what is that called when you, it's substituting?
Yes. And that is, so in phonemic awareness, it's segmentation, blending, and manipulation of phonemes.
Yes.
So if teachers start off with that from kids who are coming in, like for example, my kids came in from housing projects that were all around them. And so there was a lot, they had no idea what I was talking about when I asked them to do that.
Yes.
So there are 3 levels of phonological awareness, and I'm just going to do the first level for you. And then maybe another time we could do the others. Okay. All right. The first one is word awareness. All right. So I'll give some little markers and I'll show you. So you can get an index card and get different colors. Or, the little markers, the little white things like dominoes, checkers.
Yes.
A little round disc. Okay, you can get a lot of those. But if you're like me, I never have enough money to buy all these things. So I'll just make some little squares. So teachers can make little squares and put them in little bags for the kids to have. So you see that?
Yes.
1, 2, 3. I'm a cheap teacher. I don't spend a lot of money.
Oh, I
I have
love it
my
because one thing about New Teacher University, we're on a mission so that new teachers are not coming into the profession socialized into thinking that you should spend your money on your office
no.
because your classroom is your office and that office should be taken care of by the organization.
Okay. So here's the deal. The first and the second thing too, I know teachers do a lot of decoration. So when I talk to my my first grade kindergarten teachers, I'll say, I do not want any print in your classroom because your kids are coming to you without any prior knowledge of reading. And we talked about how, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So I love you. So they're used to speech sounds. I mean, not speech sounds. They're used to language because they talk all the time. They're used to talking. So they talk, 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 talk without thinking, listening. All right. I love you. So now take out your little discs, and they take them out. And I said, I want you to tell me how many, I just gave you a sentence. I just told you something. I love you. What does I love you mean? That's what my mom tells me all the time. Good. What does that mean? They started telling me. So we have a little discussion. I'll say the sentence again. I love you. Take your little markers out, and I want you to put one for each word that you heard. I love you. How many words did you hear? Can you see that?
3.
3 words. Very good. So from day one, I want you to start listening to what people are saying. We've got to train ourselves to listen. Sometimes you'll say, what did you say? That's because you're not listening. And good readers are good listeners. All right, let's do another one. Can you play with me right now? Everybody's listening. Tell me, take your markers and tell me how many words you heard. Can you, and when we read, we move from left to right. Can you play with me? How many words? Let's count. One, two,
1, 2,
three,
3,
four,
4, 5.
five. 5 words. Now I'm going to give you another activity. And I want you, I'm going to give you, hold on just 1 second. I want you to develop a sentence that has 6 words. Now, this is when I start my assessment because I want to know how many of them were listening and how many of them can do it. So they have the little mat, and then they have their little markers, and they can say, I saw, everybody is doing it. And I'm walking around seeing, I saw a big cat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see a big gray cat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And so they just have to tell you what the words are in their sentence.
No, they don't have to tell me right now. They're going to tell me how many they heard.
Oh, they're still listening to you at this
They're
point.
still listening.
Okay, okay.
Okay. I saw a big gray cat. Put your finger on the word for that says cat, that stands for cat. That's it. There it is. I want you to, now this is a little more complex. Can you tell me a word other than cat? Can't use cat anymore. So what would you say? I saw a big gray
Dog.
dog. I saw a big gray
Bear.
bear.
Yeah.
Very good. They started listening. After that, and then I start to the next level, and we work on that. And then I'll keep working on it every day. When they're getting up to go to the cafeteria, when they're getting ready to go to the bathroom, we're still working on whole words and hearing. Because if we're saying that the brain has to be wired and it's the auditory process that we're building, how can they build it if we're not giving them an opportunity?
Yes. And what is this strategy again?
It's a part of phonological awareness.
Phonological
It's
awareness.
the first level of phonological awareness, and it's called the Deshant model. I normally get paid for this, Terry.
Oh, new teachers. We got to do some cash apps in here. We getting some gems, some free
All right.
gems.
So the next one it's called word awareness, and Emerald Deshant. I wish I'd known this because next time I'll bring up his book. And this is in my book called Who Says I Can't? A 4-year plan to erase the reading gap and achieve proficiency by 4th grade. So I'm talking about this in my new book. So
And when is the book coming out?
I'm hoping really soon. They just told me it's going into production.
Awesome.
So
Congratulations.
thank you. You need to have me to come back so I can talk about it. Okay. So
Absolutely.
The next one is rhyme. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. So they're hearing those rhyming songs. So you're doing a lot of songs, and they're listening for words that have the same, that sound alike. Now, remember, it's different from rhymes are different from R-I-M-E, rhyme.
Yes.
Because they have to practice hearing those rhymes. And so I've got all kinds of books. So you're reading all kinds of stories. This is one of my favorite. Hey, Black Child. Have you heard this book? Hey, Black Child. Hey, Black Child, do you know who you are, who you really are? Do you know you can be what you want to be if you try to be what you can be? Hey, Black Child, do you know where you're going, where you're really, really going? Do you know you can learn what you want to learn if you try to learn what you can learn? Words did you hear over and over and over?
Yes.
Learn. Hey, Black Child, do you know you are strong? I mean, really strong? Strong. And then I may ask some words that end with at like strong. Do you know you can do what you want to do if you try to do what you can do? I'll stop right there. But reading these kinds of stories that have a rhythm and a movement,
yes.
and then they can say like and bike, like and bike, like bike. They rhyme, they sound alike at the end. C and B, C and B. They sound just alike at the end. Now, if I show them that, which they don't play fair, that's what I tell the kids. If they don't sound alike, they don't play fair. So the English language does not play fair.
Right.
So they're just listening. They're just listening. So then the last one on the first level is segmenting and blending, because that's the heart of decoding, pulling apart, pulling it back together. So I'm going to do another activity. When I do workshops, I do a lot of activities. You can give them a white sheet of paper. And with this, I mean, you can have this already done for them, but I let my students, and I've trained my teachers to do it, just make the papers on and make sure that they're able to do it on their own. All right, so see that?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to draw a picture. Let's do a teapot. Okay, teapot, teapot. All right, so I'm going to draw a picture. I'm going to think of tea, a bag of tea, and then I'm going to draw a pot. And inside, okay. So when we are trying to figure out a word, I'm talking with kids. If you notice, everything I do is in kid language.
Yes.
So that, I mean, I could talk methodology and pedagogy, but I think when I'm talking with teachers, I need them to understand that they need to be in the kids zone so that they can help them understand.
Yes.
But there are times when they do need to use those words that will help them. Okay, so here it is. Teapot. Let's put those together. Teapot. Now, later on, when we move to that letter, those words, because once they understand the 37 rhymes, they can make 500. They can make 500 words. Okay, so now I put the words on there. Teapot. What's the word? Teapot. Yes. And teapot is a compound word. So we're just showing them using whole words is what Marilyn Adams talks about, where kids can really see. But I started off with just pictures. Teapot, teapot. I could do another one. Dog house. Dog house. And so they're drawing with me. And then on this, I can later on, not right now, because I'm not showing words. I'm just talking about sounds. So yes. The hardest part is helping them to segment and blend. Because I've had some students go, let's do mat. At. And they never can. Now, what's the word? At. They'll just keep saying the same thing instead of bring it together. Yes. Mat. So there are many ways that you can look at decoding. It could be with M-A, mat, or it could be at, which is onset and rhyme, mat, or it could be at, mat. But for me, I want them, and that's the second level of the Deschamps model, where they can see the 37 rhymes. So they'll see the at family, they'll see the am family, they'll see all of that. But I'm using this as a strategy because phonological awareness is a predictor of students being on task for proficiency in reading. Well, Dr. Lavert, I can tell you that I have been in the presence of greatness this afternoon. I can sit and listen to you on, and I know that you can sit and talk on and on about it because I can tell that not only is this your passion, but it's your purpose. Yes. And thank you for your gifts, but more importantly, thank you for your choices. John Maxwell said that we should not be proud of our gifts, that we should be proud of our choices, because see, we can take our gifts and abuse them. Oh my gosh. But it's what we choose to do with our gifts that we should be proud of. And you can be very proud that you've used the gift that your mom gave you. Yes. And you've used it to move people all over the world. And I'm just thinking about that story of you talking about your mom. It reminded me so much of my mom, and that coming out of the African-American community, so many of the people that we learn the things from that's moving us through life, they did not have a degree. That's so true. Some did not have a high school diploma, but I can tell you my mom had a nice high school diploma, and then she went back to Tougaloo. I call myself her Tougaloo baby because she went back to Tougaloo after my older sister had gone off to college. And she got her associate's degree. And when she was working on her associate's degree, all of those things that she was working on, she would just kind of like pass them off to me to do certain things. Like, go try this and try that, and just so many things. And I know I benefited so much from that. So thank you for sharing that about your family, and that you all had encyclopedias, because we also need our modern families. You may not need to have physical encyclopedias in your house, and you may need to. We may need to have more physical books, because oftentimes we don't know what's going on when our students are on the online platform, our children are on the online platform. So we had plenty of books in my home for my daughter, who's now 23. So thank you so much for what you shared with us today, new teachers. We learned about reciprocal teaching. We learned about QAR, the question answer relationship. And then within phonological awareness,
We learned about segmenting and blending. We learned some other decoding strategies. You gave us a lot today. Thank you so much for this. And it's going to be so valuable to our new teachers. And Dr. Lavert, again, thank you for your gifts and thank you for your choices. And thank you for joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. And before you leave, I always ask all of my guests, would you please give us a word of encouragement to our new teachers to help them on those days that they feel like they're not making a difference, those days when they feel discouraged and thinking, well, I should just leave. What would you say to a new teacher that's in that space?
Oh, that's a great question. And I have felt that way as a new teacher and even as an experienced teacher.
Yes.
But you know what? I just take a deep breath and said, the light hasn't come on yet, but it will.
Yes.
And that's the bottom line, because it will. It takes a little bit of time for that processing, for that connection to take place. But you know, when it does, it does. And that's it. Oh, I need to tell you one thing. I need to tell you other thing too. This is when we're doing phonological awareness. I forgot I put my bunny ears on. And every time we grow new dendrites, I use a pipe cleaner. And every time when the light comes on, I put it on. So every time we start this phonological awareness, or even thinking, I said, now you got to put your bunny ears on because this is the inside of your brain and we've just put it on the outside. So there it is.
I'm just loving this because one of the things that I used to do with my students at the elementary level because I did the brain research with Eric Jensen.
Oh, yeah.
I went to his week-long conferences and I would tell my students, I would say, see, every time you learn something new and you're struggling with it, those are those dendrites trying to come together. I said, so just remember that they're coming, they're coming, they're coming. Then all of a sudden they connect and you have new dendrites. And
Well,
when I
this
would
is
see them
it.
struggling, I would do this. But for you to give them that representation, I love it. You really gave them something to put on their head that they could really connect to that.
Every day. And you know what? When I worked with middle school and high school students too that were struggling readers, they put it on too. And you'd be surprised. They just loved it because every time they learned something different, I said, you don't have to talk to me. Your pipe cleaners are there. You put it on. The one at the end of the semester, those that have the most on there, then we're having a pizza party.
Thank you so much for sharing that because when I moved into the high school principal space, there were people saying, and I had been a middle school principal and a high school teacher, but because I had done such a great job at elementary, there were people saying, well, he doesn't know high school. No, I didn't know elementary, but I did a great job there. One, I had wonderful, phenomenal teachers, and I listened to them. And when I moved to high school, when I went back to high school, what I learned was take those things I did in elementary,
Most
bring them to high
definitely.
school. In fact, I got my elementary assistant principal, and she moved to high school with me as an instructional facilitator so that she could help us make sure that we stayed connected because our 16-year-old boys are just 6-year-old boys in a bigger body.
Exactly. That's so
They,
true.
they they need that same excitement. They need that same hands-on. They don't need to walk into someone just lecturing to them. And as we would create competitions for them, they would be just as excited as anyone else. But Dr. Lavert, let me stop right there.
Okay.
You are a masterpiece. Thank you so much for sharing with my audience today. And thank you for joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. New teachers, hang in there. It is April. You've almost made the whole year. We're so proud of you that you decided to stay. You came back after Labor Day. You came back after the Thanksgiving break. You came back after the winter break. You've come back after spring break, and now you're almost at the end of the year. You keep coming back. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross, and remember, every day there's a child that comes to school because you're there. So
Oh,
keep up the good work.
thank you. Goodbye.
Absolutely.